The next CSV we have to work with is our Classlist CSV. Let's start by going through the mandatory fields for the Classlist CSV. The first here is the class ID. This works in a similar way to both the student and teacher IDs and assigns an individual unique ID to a given class. Note that this is only going to show up for administrators and can be a good way to identify that class individually and will be used in the next CSV for enrollments to assign students to these classes. You'll notice that the class ID here that we're using is a short code, which is easy to identify which class that is. However, isn't necessarily what you might want to read when you're looking at a gradebook. For that, we have the class name, which is our next mandatory field. The class name is what actually shows up on the teacher's gradebook, and this is what they'll see when they go to select a class to enter grades. It's important that this is a good reflection of what that class is and is easy for the teacher to read so that they can take full advantage of the gradebook and can easily identify their various classes. The next column we have here is Teacher ID. Teacher ID should be what you used on the first CSV we were looking at earlier. If I quickly toggle back using the tabs at the bottom of my Excel spreadsheet here, I can see the teacher IDs here. If we look at Lloyd, for example, we can see that this teacher ID is what is being utilized for these three classes, which is assigning that teacher to all three science classes we have here. The next column we have here is subject ID. It is highly recommended you do not use subject ID. In most cases, this will not be required. There are some isolated cases which we've highlighted in our documents, which you can find online. And if you'd like to learn more about subject ID, we recommend you reach out to us using support@chalk.com. Reporting class can be helpful when generating progress reports for your school. In general, you may not want to use this initially. However, you can always come back later and add to this. In order to set a class as a reporting class, you would simply enter true into this column. This allows you to group progress reports by a specific class, similar to how using the grade level grouping allows you to group progress reports by a specific grade level. To learn more about how to use reporting class, we highly recommend taking a look at some of our online resources, as well as reaching out to us using support@chalk.com. Next, we have the term ID column. This term ID column should look familiar to you, as you would have set up a term ID when creating your school year. Within your school year, you can create multiple different term IDs, which can have a big impact on how grades are calculated for various classes. To assign those term IDs to your classes, you're going to use this term ID column. In the example we have here, we can see the first few classes are either in the fall term or in the spring term. Again, these would have been IDs that we set when we created our school year. If we quickly go back to Chalk, we can see where those would be by going into our school, going into our settings, and going into marking cycles here. The various terms will show up here, and the term IDs that we set can be found here, where we can take that value and bring it back into our Excel sheet and put it in the term ID column. You can always come back and reassign this later if you need to put a new term on a given class. Next, we have our grading scale ID. In a similar way, when you set up your grading scale at your school level, you can assign those to individual classes so that classes have different grading scales that they're working with. Here we have an ABC scale that we've assigned to some classes and an SNU scale that we've assigned to others. Keep in mind that this is the ID that you would have created when you created your grading scale on the admin page. We've prepared separate resources to help guide through how to create grading scales. The last two columns here are is archived and is deleted. These work similar to how they work on the student CSV, except these apply to classes. For example, if we wanted to archive a given class, we would simply come in here and type true for the is archived column. When you archive a class, it will hide that gradebook so the teacher can no longer see it, and those grades will no longer show for any guardians or students if they have access. If you do archive it, it does give you the option to unarchive that down the road if you ever need to access any information from that gradebook. For now, if you don't want to archive one, simply leave this blank or enter false. In a similar way, you can use isDeleted. The only difference here is that it will actually completely remove that gradebook and you will not be able to recover it. Keep in mind that we highly recommend using isArchived so that you do have the option to recover any information you might want to remove initially.